And now, from the capital city, it's Nightique with Edward St. Pay.
Thank you, Jim Pollard. I am your host, Edward St. Pay. Now let's take a look at the weather. Whoa, wait a minute, I forgot. This is Nightique. Oh, in more news from the capital city, tensions flared recently between the Jackson City Council and Mayor Tony Yarborough after the council again voted down awarding an approximately $15 million sewage sludge removal contract, which is supported by the mayor. You might say the sludge has really hit the fan here in Jackson. It's actually become a sludge fest, you might say. The council voted the contract down because they claim it's backed by one of the mayor's biggest supporters. Now, because of a technicality in the rules, the vote may not happen again for 12 months, so the city of Jackson is stuck with the sludge. The city's economic development group promptly changed the city's slogan to Jackson, the city of sludge. And then the city council accused the economic development group of mayoral cronyism and renamed Jackson Sludge City. Not to be outdone, the state's economic development group then countered with their own slogan, Jackson, birthplace of America's sludge. Enough of the sludge slinging. We have a great show tonight. We've got Furlow from the Mississippi Museum's Hall of Fame and Mr. Dennis Smith, the prior 40-year news director at WLBT, NBC affiliate in Jackson. We'll have more of the show after these messages.
We'll be right back with more of Nightique after these messages.
This is our Graze box. It's a great way to snack. Fresh, tasty, and created using only the best ingredients. Choose from our range of over 90 delicious snacks. We'd like to invite you to try a hand-picked box for free. Go to graze.com and we'll send a free box directly to your office or home. It may even help you keep your hand out of the cookie jar.
Go to graze.com and enter the code GRAZE34 for a free box.
Graze.com. Snacking reinvented.
Ingalls Shipbuilding has pioneered the development and production of technologically advanced, highly capable warships for the U.S. Navy, Coast Guard, and Marine Corps for more than 75 years. Ingalls is Mississippi's largest manufacturing employer. And today, Ingalls has an immediate need for more than 200 electricians at our Pascagoula, Mississippi site. Apply today at www.buildyourcareer.com or call 888-935-1507.
And now back to more Nightique.
Dennis Smith, the news director at Channel 3 in Jackson, recently retired after 45 years in broadcasting. You know, welcome back to the program.
Good to be here.
You know, we were talking a little bit last time about some of the historical developments that you've seen through the years in broadcasting.
Yeah.
One thing that I'd like to talk to you about is a significant event that occurred in the late 60s and the early 70s, which was the pulling of the license of Lamar Life Broadcasting, WLBT in Jackson, the NBC affiliate, by the FCC. Tell us about that story.
Well, what little I know is that one of the main reasons was that I think Dr. Aaron Henry, who was head of the NAACP at the time in Mississippi, was running for office, and there may have been some other office seekers too, but WLBT wouldn't give him any airtime, wouldn't let him buy any airtime. And as a result of that, the people in his camp and others who were watching this whole scenario filed an action with the FCC and said, look, this is not right. You've got to make sure everyone out there who has an opportunity to be on the air and espouse their position for whatever position they're running in an election has an opportunity. And so as a result of that, during the FCC hearing and during the process, as best as I can recall, this is a little before my time, but the bottom line is interim operators came in. They were called Communications Improvement Incorporated, CII. As a group of local people, and it was a racially diverse group of folks who came in and said, you know, we're going to make Channel 3, we promised the FCC we're going to make some significant changes while we are interim operators of WLBT. And so they did. They hired a number of folks, minorities particularly. One of the things they did that they promised to do was to make a big difference in community programming, one of which was the fact that they wanted to start a weekly public affairs program, a hard, in-depth program. And they had asked a few people to try to do this because it was a weekly half-hour investigative documentary. Is no small effort. Bottom line is, I was working at WJTV, and they came over and asked me if I would be interested. I looked at it and I said, you know, I really would be. I had been in television already 7 years at that time, and I said, you know, this is a great opportunity. And so I took over the position. We had a staff of, at that time, I think 4 or 5, where we, again, had a weekly half-hour documentary. And it went over real well. It ran on Wednesday nights at 6:30 and ran for 8 or 9 years, I guess, altogether. We did a number of documentaries on a number of different things, probably maybe 300 programs we did. And people really enjoyed watching it. They thought it made a difference. It was a good forum for a lot of things that could be addressed in our state, whether it was public corruption, whether it was water supply, whether it was streets and drainage and roads and things that really need to be looked at. You couldn't look at just in a normal newscast, but you had to spend, you know, anywhere from 15 minutes to 30 minutes on some of these issues that people could really digest and see what needed to be done. And so it went over real well, and I was very pleased, very truly fortunate to have been involved in it.
And Probe, that show, won the Peabody for, what show was it?
This was a program that involved the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee at the time, Senator Bill Bergen. In 1976, he was the most powerful man in state government. He controlled the purse strings virtually of the entire state government, over $1 billion. And if you didn't get, if you were a department head in Mississippi state government, you had to go before Bergen and his committee. And he was pretty rough on him. There was no question about that. But at the same time, Bill Miner, who was at the time with, had worked with Times-Picayune, had looked at Bill Bergen. I looked at him, and we realized that, you know, Miner had written some articles. I went and took some of those and addressed them more in depth. We also uncovered some issues myself over a 2-week period. The 2 weeks that I spent putting that piece together, all these blatant conflicts of interest that Senator Bergen had, was the hardest 2 weeks I think I've ever worked. I would go to bed at night just thinking of stuff, couldn't, you know, and I'd get up in the middle of the night and start writing things down and just, you know, make sure I didn't lose sight of it. But it really
because you know that you are doing an investigative piece on one of the most powerful men in government.
Oh yeah.
And it's not flattering what you're finding out, right?
No. He was very. He was good, but at the same time, he had his fingers in a lot of stuff. I know I drove up to Columbus with a photographer. We were looking at this question about a dorm issue up there, the MSCW, some questions about who owned it and how much they owned and this, that, and the other. License plates conflicts. His law firm had involved in a lot of things. There's a lot of fingers in a lot of things. One guy I was talking to as we were staying in a motel downtown, I said, you know, he promised he would talk to me. And I said, okay, that's great. We'll plan on meeting in about 15 minutes. Well, after 3 or 4 minutes after I called him, he called me back. He said, I just got a call saying I better not talk to you, which led me to believe that somebody in that motel was listening in on the phone call, knew who he was, and the word got to him that you better shut up.
So he did not talk to you?
Did not talk to me. But that, you know, it didn't make any difference. It was an issue that there was so many others that Bergen was involved in, and it finally caught up with him. It finally caught up with him when he and a guy named Flavis Lambert, who was the darling of the young senator there. He and Bergen were involved in this Head Start deal, $860,000 Head Start deal out of Tennessee. The contract was $860,000. They ended up getting $640,000. It was a pretty hefty fee.
So no money left for the kids.
And the feds began looking at it, and they realized, well, okay. And so bottom line is he ended up getting convicted. I covered his trial down on the Gulf Coast, and that was in him.
That was the end of that, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then you went on to become news director for many, many years. So we touched on this last time you were here. what goes into whether you pull the trigger on doing a story if it's a situation, not the average run-of-the-mill news story, but something that is investigative, is dealing with a powerful individual? At what point do you pull the trigger and go forward with it, or do you pull back?
Well, you want to make sure your ducks in a row. You want to make sure you're fair and you're accurate. You got to make sure the staff who is involved in looking at this know all the elements. You don't want to go, above. Don't go around too many corners, but you want to be above board. Make sure you got all your documents in a row. That was one thing that I thoroughly enjoyed doing, not just personally, but being involved as a news director in my staff and helping them go after, lots of questionable activities. Back in those days, the police department was letting crooks off right and left. And one of the reasons they were letting them off, a lot of sticky fingers were out there. And we documented that. And some of the people ended up going down, and others took off and left out of state. But, you got to have eyes and ears on things that are happening out there in the community, because the public can't do it themselves. And there is never enough investigative examination and a lot of stuff here. Now, there are some things going on out there that some of the local media are doing that's not very sex involving issues. It's really a lot of very detailed on government contracts and other things like that. But the whole thing is a very rewarding process when you feel like you've done it as best you can, and your staff has dedicated themselves to doing it and uncover some issues, and the people really appreciate it. Whether it's the water infrastructure, whether streets and drainage and contracts with the radios for the government entities, that sort of thing. It's always something underlying that begs to be examined a little bit further to see just what goes on.
Is there enough emphasis today in the newsroom on investigative journalism?
No. And part of the problem, Edward, is this. When I became news director in '89, we were doing 15 hours of news a week, WOBT, 15 hours of news a week. When I left, we were doing 47.5 hours of news a week on two different channels, the NBC station and the Fox station they're running. Now I think they're running like 5 stations there at 5 channels at one time. But you never can, and that's the single thing that really bothers me the most is that frankly, there are too many shootings and muggings and things out there that we see time and time again without going underneath the bottom and finding why these guys keep getting out. Well, the police chief, Lee Vance, knows. He can tell you right now in a heartbeat. Biggest problem is we got a revolving door where the judges keep letting them out time and time again. Until they fix that, you keep having the same problem. But it needs more in-depth examination. All of this issue, particularly with crime in Jackson, infrastructure and all that, you can't put enough. It's not a sexy subject when it comes to lack of video, but it's a subject that people truly understand and appreciate more shining the light on. Well, we'd like to have an open invitation with you to come back and talk to us about some of these things, because these are things that, your perspective after being in the driver's seat in the newsroom for all those years, it's a unique perspective, and we appreciate having you. I'm glad to do it. Okay, thank you, Absolutely. Dennis. Thanks a lot. Take care. Okay, we'll be back after this.
We'll be right back with more of Nightique after these messages.
This is our Gray's Box. It's a great way to snack. Fresh, tasty, and created using only the best ingredients. Choose from our range of over 90 delicious snacks. We'd like to invite you to try a hand-picked box for free. Go to grays.com and we'll send a free box directly to your office or home. It may even help you keep your hand out of the cookie jar.
Go to grays.com and enter the code GRAYS34 for a free box.
Grays.com. Snacking reinvented.
Ingalls Shipbuilding has pioneered the development and production of technologically advanced, highly capable warships for the U.S. Navy, Coast Guard, and Marine Corps for more than 75 years. Ingalls is Mississippi's largest manufacturing employer, and today Ingalls has an immediate need for more than 200 electricians at our Pascagoula, Mississippi site. Apply today at www.buildyourcareer.com or call 888-935-1507.
When you are looking to further your education, there's only one university that towers above the rest, Jackson State University. Jackson State University is one of the leading universities in research, technology, and innovation, graduating more than 1,300 students annually and a consistent growth in revenue. Jackson State University is ranked #1 amongst the HBCUs in research and development. Make the right choice, the one choice. One Jackson State University, changing lives one student at a time.
And now back to more Nightique.
Welcome back to the show, and we'd like to welcome Shaw Furlow to the show, and he's the Executive Director of the Mississippi Musicians Hall of Fame.
That's right.
Well, right out of the box, I mean, we've got some of the greatest musicians in the world here in Mississippi, right?
Exactly right. We are the birthplace of America's music. If you look at your car tag, or if you drive into the state on the interstates, you'll see Mississippi, the birthplace of America's music. And that is a phrase that we have trademarked, copyrighted, and then we, of course, licensed it to the state of Mississippi to use as they choose, you know. But we actually own that phrase, Mississippi, the birthplace of America's music.
Okay, the birthplace of America's music. We've got two lines of the family tree coming in. We've got country and we've got blues. I guess that is what we're alluding to.
Well, you know, if you go back to the old blues guys, they started with what they were field hollerers, and they would holler from one field to the other to sort of communicate. And then over the years, it developed into the blues. I mean, you're thinking of like at Dockery Farm up there on Highway 8 in between Louisville and Cleveland. There were 400 families living on Dockery Farm at one time. So on weekends, they would get together, and they didn't have any money. They couldn't go anywhere. They were paid in script for that you could only spend on Dockery Farms. You know, that was the money they made. So they would make their own fun, and they started these juke joints, and the blues started from the old gospel and the old hollering. The blues started, and we were the first to have that recorded in Mississippi. And then, of course, we go from that to country music, and then also into rock and roll. So we can claim all three of those genres as original to our state. And it's not just us saying it; it's been documented in books and the New York Times, and I mean the New York. One of the newspapers up there. I don't cut that out, right? But it's been documented that we were the first. When Mr. Lomax came down from Washington to do the field recording of the old blues guys, he did them, a lot of them at Dockery Farms, a lot of them over in Rosedale, and so and then the first country recording was done by Meridian native Jimmy Rogers. I just drew a blank bigger than Hattiesburg there. All right, Jimmy Rogers, and then of course the first rock and roll album. Right now it's credited to Ike Turner and his song Rocket 88. But if you go back further, you'll see that Charlie Patton and some of these old blues guys were starting to move into rock and roll themselves. It's an interesting history.
It really is. I mean, and everything came from that. I mean, popular music in America. It's probably the indigenous music of the nation.
Yeah.
If you, I mean, blues and jazz was created here.
Right.
Whereas all the other forms of music that we know about were created in other countries at other times.
Now, and jazz, the interesting thing about that is, while it was probably created in New Orleans, in that area, in South Louisiana area, it got its name in Vicksburg, Mississippi. A man was playing drums whose name was Charles, and they called him Chaz, and he took a drum solo, and the band was yelling, "Go Chaz, go Chaz." The audience picked it up as "Go Jazz," and the word jazz was coined in Vicksburg, Mississippi.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, right now, the Musicians Hall of Fame, you've already got several of them in existence in the state.
Right. We have 3 museums. 3 museums. One of them, the actual Hall of Fame, is in the Onstage restaurant at the airport here in Jackson. And then we have a museum that's primarily dedicated to Robert Johnson and Tommy Johnson. They're both from Copiah County, and so we have a museum in Hazelhurst that's sort of dedicated to them, and there's other things in there as well. And then our latest one is above the Iron Horse Grill here in town, in Jackson. The upstairs, it's called the Mississippi Music Experience, and if you've not seen that, you need to go look at it, because it is a sure enough first-class museum.
When you talk about some of the inductees in the Hall of Fame, give us some examples.
We can start at the very beginning and go back to Muddy Waters and B.B. King and Charlie Patton and those guys. Moving on to Jimmy Buffett, his guitar player, Mac McAnally. In the classical music, Leontine Price from Laurel, who is known as the diva of all divas. She was the first African-American female to become a regular member of the Metropolitan Opera, and she's from Laurel, Mississippi. We have Dee Barton, who is a jazz and film score. Bones Malone, who just completed a stint 30 years on the David Letterman show. So we've got any number. We have people that are in for technology too. Bob Pittman, who invented MTV and is now runs iHeartRadio, is from Brookhaven, Mississippi.
And you have that fellow they call Elvis too, right?
Yeah, I think he's in. I think he's in. Yeah, you'd be surprised. I go to classrooms and I talk to them. I say, who is the father of rock and roll? And they'll all instantly go to Elvis. And I say, no, you guys aren't going far enough back. You need to keep moving back a little bit. But it's interesting talking to the classrooms.
So, well, tell me about Elvis. I mean, I know you've got probably some stories. I mean, you guys have studied Elvis.
Well, I'm going to tell you one of the. I am not an Elvis expert. My area is more predates him into the blues and early rock and roll and the classical music, which is what I've been doing for the last 41 years. And so I'm not as versed on Elvis. I will say that there's a really nice museum in Jackson, Tennessee, called the Rockabilly Hall of Fame. And there's an older gentleman that runs that museum, and he and Elvis and Johnny Cash and all these guys were childhood buddies. And he's got pictures of Elvis playing football in the backyard in Tupelo, or in the church at Tupelo. He's got all kinds of pictures up there. We've got Elvis memorabilia, but so does everybody else, So
that's kind of a phenomenon, a worldwide phenomenon. Another phenomenon right out of the state of Mississippi.
Yeah, right.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
What are your plans? I mean, you've got 3 of these museums or Hall of Fames now, but you have other plans too, right?
Yeah. I've been on this job since July 1, 2015. And so I haven't had a chance to sit down and even really think about formulating a long-term plan, because we had so many short-term projects that were already in the cooker when I took over. So, but one of the main long-term projects is to build a freestanding museum and Hall of Fame that would be a destination that people will come and see. The Grammy Museum in Cleveland, Mississippi, that they're anticipating 100,000 people a year coming to that one museum. And that's 100,000 people coming to Cleveland. What is the economic impact of Cleveland going to be with those 100,000 people? How many hotels are they going to have to build up there? How many restaurants? I mean, the economic impact is going to be huge. And so if we could build something like that, that would be a destination that people would want to come and see. And That's my goal.
And where would this be?
We'll come back and talk about that. All right. we have some things lined up that I'm not privy to talk about yet.
Right.
So we'll come back.
Safe to say it'd be somewhere in the state, right?
It would be. I would love for it to be in Jackson.
Yeah.
Well, I would love for it to be.
Kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, right in the center of the state, so to
right.
speak.
And I would like for it to be in the entertainment section of Jackson. We'll leave it at that for right now.
Okay. Now, what is the website for information right now?
missmusic.org. O-R-G.
msmusic.org.
Yes.
And on that site, you can find out about the Hall of Fame.
Yes, we have. The site has not been upgraded since I've become the executive director, and so there's still some things on there that are inaccurate. But I think you can go back and see all 270 of our inductees into the Hall of Fame. You can see what the criteria is for an inductee. And then we also have swag. You know, we got shirts and books, and we've got we've shot a documentary about 4 years ago that is available on the Mississippi Department of Education website for teachers that want to download it and bring it into their classroom free of charge. And we've done several projects like that. We've got several videos. Vasti has done a great video for us. I don't know if you know Vasti Jackson, the blues singer from Hattiesburg, but he's done a wonderful DVD for us talking about Robert Johnson and some of the other blues. So we've got all of that on that website also, if people want to spend money with us.
Well, Sean, we want you to come back and update us when you've got some new news about what you guys are doing. The invitation is always open, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. Find me $10 million, and I'll be back as soon as we get the money for. That's what it's going to cost.
Okay, so, we're going to ask our viewers to send in $10 million.
$10 million.
Okay, good. Shaw Furlow from the Mississippi Musicians Hall of Fame. Yep. And thanks for being with us.
Thanks,
we'll be
Ed.
back after this.
Join us every weeknight statewide for Nightique with Edward St. Pé. If you have suggestions for guests or want to be on the show yourself, drop us a line at www.nightique.com. I'm your announcer, Jim Pollard. Good night from all of us at Nightique.